There's something profoundly compelling about a man who doesn't lay all his cards on the table, who speaks with intention rather than noise. When you carry emotional mystery, you create a sense of depth that can't be immediately read, and that in itself becomes a powerful psychological magnet. You see, most people are trying so hard to be understood that they give everything away. They over-explain, overshare, overperform. But when you choose to remain composed, restrained, and thoughtful, you're signaling something rare: confidence without the need for validation. And it's in that restraint that the curiosity begins. Because when a woman can't fully define what's going on in your mind, when she can't quite categorize you or predict you, that uncertainty keeps you alive in her thoughts. She replays interactions not just to remember what you said, but to try to extract a meaning she feels but can't fully grasp. That's not manipulation. That's psychological presence. That's what happens when a man lives in alignment with himself rather than trying to gain approval from everyone else. Now, this doesn't mean playing games or withholding emotion to keep someone guessing. It's not about being evasive for the sake of control. It's about being internally anchored. When you don't need to over-explain yourself or constantly showcase your feelings, she senses that your emotions run deep. And the deeper something runs, the more interesting it becomes. Because depth is something that demands exploration. Shallow waters never inspire obsession. Deep oceans always do. Most men who lose a woman's attention do so not because they were too quiet, but because they were too loud in the wrong way. They expressed without purpose. They revealed without boundaries. They chased clarity at the cost of their own self-worth. But a man who understands his value doesn't need to shout it. He doesn't need to chase affirmation. He just is. And that presence, stable, unshaken, and quietly potent, invites her to lean in rather than pull away. So when she thinks of you, it won't be because you demanded her attention. It will be because you didn't. It'll be because you left her with questions, not confusion, with wonder, not chaos. And most importantly, because you allowed her to feel your presence without trying to control her perception of it. That's the kind of impact that lingers, not for minutes, not for hours, but for days, weeks, even years. That's the kind of man who lives in her mind even in his absence. Let her try to figure you out, not because you're hiding, but because you're too grounded to perform. Most men underestimate the power of being genuinely kind, but from a place of strength, not desperation. When you treat her with quiet respect, when you show patience in moments where others would have erupted, and when you carry yourself with a consistent sense of integrity, something shifts in the way she sees you. You're no longer just another man trying to win her attention. You become the one who made her feel safe without needing to prove anything. Kindness, when it's real and unforced, isn't weak, it's magnetic. It reveals emotional intelligence, restraint, and an understanding that people remember how you made them feel more than what you said. So when you're respectful not only in your words, but in your energy, when you give space instead of pressure, listen instead of interrupt, and allow her the freedom to come forward instead of trying to pull her in, you stand out. Not loudly, not aggressively, but deeply. She may not always show it immediately. She might still keep her distance or pretend not to notice. But internally, it's registering. Every time you didn't snap back in a moment of tension, every time you chose clarity over manipulation, every time you gave her dignity instead of judgment, that's when the emotional groundwork is laid. And long after the conversation ends, long after you walk away, those moments stay with her. They echo, they replay. Because what you did in those moments was create contrast. You showed her something she's not used to. Genuine kindness that's not wrapped in neediness. That's rare, that's disarming, it triggers reflection, sometimes even confusion. She might find herself wondering, why do I keep thinking about him? It's not always attraction in the beginning, it's respect, it's admiration. And from that soil, deeper emotions start to grow. The world is full of men who try to be memorable through dominance or charm, but the ones who leave a lasting impression are those who move with grace while standing in their strength. There's nothing more compelling than someone who can remain composed under pressure, generous without expectations, and kind without sacrificing his own boundaries. So when you treat her with that quiet strength, even in the smallest interactions, you're planting something inside her mind that doesn't just fade, it builds. And one day, maybe after you've walked away, maybe after silence stretches long between you, she'll feel it. Unexpectedly, a moment will trigger it, a thought, a memory, something simple, and just like that, you're there again, not because you tried to force your way into her thoughts, but because your kindness left a mark that couldn't be erased. There's something subtle, yet incredibly powerful about consistency. When you show up the same way every time, calm, steady, authentic, it creates a quiet psychological effect that most people don't immediately notice, but they absolutely feel. And for her, especially in a world where so many people shift based on attention, moods, or validation, that kind of emotional steadiness becomes unforgettable. At first, she may not acknowledge it. Maybe she even tests it. She'll throw you off course, just slightly, to see if you'll change. If your energy falters, if your kindness was only surface level, if your interest was conditional. But when you remain composed, grounded, and firm in who you are, when you show her that your behavior isn't dependent on her reactions, then it clicks. You're not playing a role. You're not wearing a mask to impress her. You're just being you. And that realization for a woman who's used to inconsistency and performance is deeply disruptive. It stays with her because it's rare. Most men are emotionally erratic. One day they're warm and attentive, the next distant or overly reactive. But when you move through life anchored, when your words align with your actions and your emotions aren't dictated by external approval, it creates a presence she can't ignore. It's not loud, it's not flashy, it's not romantic in the traditional sense, but it's trustworthy. And the moment she realizes that, you start living rent-free in her mind. Because now you're associated with calm in a storm. You're tied to a sense of internal safety. And even if she walks away, even if she pulls back or tries to move on, there will come a moment, often in solitude, where she reflects and realizes, you were always there, exactly the same. No games, no pretenses, just clarity. And that realization, when contrasted against the chaos she may encounter elsewhere, becomes haunting. And not haunting in a negative sense, but in a way that lingers, in a way that reminds her what she lost. It's the kind of emotional memory that doesn't shout, it whispers. Over time, it echoes. And eventually she finds herself comparing every new interaction to the consistency you brought. And nothing quite matches. Nothing quite feels as grounded. So while others try to stand out with dramatics or emotional fireworks, remember this: stability leaves a deeper impression than intensity ever could. She may not admit it right away, but it's your steady presence she'll keep remembering long after the noise fades. When you give her the space to wonder, it changes the dynamic entirely. You're not begging, you're not explaining, you're not defending your worth through endless conversations or clarifications. You're silent, and that silence speaks louder than anything you could say. It's not silence born out of pettiness or manipulation. It's the kind that comes from maturity, from dignity, from knowing that you've said enough, done enough, tried enough, and now you're letting her sit with the absence. That's when the mental noise begins for her. Because for the first time, she doesn't have your attention as a cushion. Your energy isn't cushioning her doubts anymore. She used to feel your emotional availability like a safety net, knowing you'd chase, fix, or at least reach out to check the temperature between you two. But now it's quiet, and the mind hates a vacuum. So it fills it with assumptions, scenarios, questions. She starts wondering what changed. Was it something she said? Did you finally stop caring? Are you seeing someone else? And that's the irony. When you were available, she had the luxury of taking you for granted. Now that you've gone still, your absence becomes far more noticeable than your presence ever was. And in that stillness, her pride starts to wrestle with her emotions. She may want to reach out, but then again, she doesn't want to look like she cares too much. She may scroll through your social media, but she won't like a post. She might type a message, even write a paragraph, only to delete it before sending. That's what happens when you let her wonder. It's not about punishing her. It's about giving her the gift of her own reflection. Because sometimes people only appreciate value in hindsight. When the noise is gone and all they're left with is memory. You see, silence doesn't mean indifference. It means you respect yourself enough not to demand someone else see your worth. You allow them the space to see it on their own. And if they do, that realization is far more powerful than anything you could have ever said out loud. But if they don't, then at least you know their attention was never truly about you. It's about control, about reassurance, about ego. Letting her wonder isn't about control. It's about letting go. It's about letting the silence do what words can't. And when you give her nothing to react to, nothing to fight against, all she's left with is herself. And that is where the real thinking begins. One of the most powerful things you can do in a relationship, especially when it begins to fall apart, is to stop explaining yourself. You don't owe anyone an endless justification for your worth, your presence, or your love. There's a moment when your peace becomes more important than proving your point, and that's when everything changes. See, when a woman is used to you chasing, she's used to you reacting. She is used to you clarifying your intent, expressing your pain, and trying to win back the emotional connection. But when you stop doing that, when you simply go quiet and withdraw your energy, it creates a silence that forces her to listen to what your words never could quite say. Because that silence is not empty. It's full of all the times you tried, full of the messages you sent that went unanswered, full of the effort you made that was dismissed, full of the love you gave that wasn't reciprocated. When you no longer chase, you're not playing a game, you're reclaiming your time. You're refusing to audition for a role you already filled wholeheartedly. You're no longer participating in a performance where the other person is the only one applauded while your value is questioned. And when that happens, something shifts in her. At first, maybe she tells herself she doesn't care, maybe she pretends it's a relief, maybe she even tells her friends it's better this way, but then the days go on and it's not better, it's quieter. And that quiet isn't peace, it's unsettling. Because she begins to notice your absence not as a moment, but as a pattern, a reality. She starts to feel that cold space you used to warm. And it stings not because she misses attention, but because for the first time she starts realizing what she may have lost. That's the paradox. The moment you stop explaining, stop pursuing, stop trying to be understood, that's the moment she starts wondering. And in that wondering, she begins to replay it all. The good, the bad, the effort you made, the loyalty you showed, the stability you gave. It comes in flashes. The way you made her laugh, the way you showed up, the small things she overlooked. Suddenly, your silence isn't distance, it's clarity. And it makes her think in ways your words never could. When you stop explaining and start living with quiet certainty, that's when the weight of your presence truly hits. That's when she starts to understand, maybe too late, that what she thought was replaceable was actually rare. And the only sound left is the echo of what she took for granted. There's something deeply unsettling about realizing that someone who once cared so much has found peace in letting go. When you finally stop chasing, stop calling, stop trying to prove your worth, she might act unbothered at first. She might pretend it doesn't affect her. She might go about her life posting photos, keeping busy, surrounded by noise. But that silence you left behind, that's what haunts her because it carries weight. And the longer it stretches, the louder it becomes. It makes her wonder, why did he stop? That question doesn't leave her alone. It lingers in the quiet moments when the phone doesn't ring and no one is checking in. It follows her into the night when she scrolls through your old messages and realizes you haven't reached out. You haven't fought for her this time. What starts to tear her apart isn't the silence itself, it's what it means. She starts asking herself if maybe, just maybe, you've finally accepted that your worth doesn't need to be proven, that you're no longer trying to fix something broken on your own, that you've outgrown the cycle of give and wait. She begins to sense that your silence isn't passive, it's intentional, it's strength. That's when the panic sets in because she expected you to break eventually. She thought you'd reach that point where you couldn't take the distance anymore and would come running back like before. But this time you didn't. And the longer you stay silent, the clearer it becomes. You're not waiting anymore. You've chosen peace over persuasion. And that reality, it cuts deeper than any argument ever could. Because now she's not dealing with the version of you who's emotionally reactive. She's facing the version of you that has matured. That version doesn't beg for clarity, doesn't fight to be heard, and doesn't need her to see your value anymore. He already sees it for himself. And that's the hardest truth she's forced to face. When you truly stop caring about how she perceives you, that's when she starts to see you the way she never did before. It's not revenge, it's not manipulation, it's growth. And sometimes growth looks like silence. Sometimes the strongest message you can send is no message at all. Because peace is louder than any words you could have spoken. And when she realizes she can no longer reach the version of you who kept reaching for her, it becomes the moment she never forgets.